everyone and welcome back. 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. This is Jiwon and you are listening to Understanding Korea, one story at a time where we talk about Korean history, culture, and the very specific ways they quietly shape our everyday lives. Today we are talking about honbap, eating alone. If you read this week's newsletter, you already know that I began with something funny and also very revealing. The Korean honbap difficulty chart. A chart that ranked how difficult or socially brave it was to eat alone in different places. Convenience store, easy. Food court, still easy. Fast food, manageable. A regular restaurant, now people might start looking. Korean barbecue alone, advanced. A drinking place alone, final boss. And I love that because once you hear it, you immediately understand something. This was never only about food. Nobody needs a difficulty chart to eat rice. Nobody says, "Today I will eat bravely chew noodles." The difficulty was not hunger. The difficulty was being seen. So today, I want to stay with that idea a little longer. The newsletter gives the main structure of the story, how honbap moved from embarrassment to infrastructure, from social discomfort to a recognized part of modern Korean life. But in this episode, I want to slow down and ask, what does it feel like to eat alone in a culture where eating together used to carry so much meaning? Why did one person at a table ever look awkward? And when does eating alone become freedom? When does it become loneliness? And when is it simply lunch, which in Korea is almost never simply lunch? So let's begin with the most ordinary scene. One person, one table, one meal, and a whole society quietly watching. Before we can understand honbap, we have to remember what the Korean table was carrying. Last week, we talked about the phrase, 밥 먹었어? Did you eat? And we talked about how that question is not usually a nutritional survey. It can mean, are you okay? Are you taking care of yourself? Is someone taking care of you? Are you still holding together? In Korean, 밥 means rice, but it also means meal. And meals have long been one of the ways Koreans express care, belonging, and concern. A mother may not say, "I'm worried about your emotional well-being." She may say, 밥은 먹고 다녀? Are you eating these days? A friend may not say, "I sense that your life is collapsing and I want to support you without being intrusive." They may say, 뭐라도 먹어야지. You should eat something. This is why the Korean table was never only furniture. It was a relationship, family, care, obligation, hierarchy, sometimes warmth, and sometimes surveillance. So when someone chooses to sit alone with food, it can mean much more than, "I'm hungry and this is convenient." It can look like they are stepping away from an entire social arrangement. That is the emotional background of honbap. And this is why eating alone in Korea needed its own word. So let's break down the word. honbap comes from honja, meaning alone, and 밥, meaning rice or meal. So literally, it means something like alone meal or solo rice, which sounds almost cute in English. Solo rice, a tiny bowl with a backpack. But culturally, honbap is heavier than that. Because in Korea, food has often been organized around other people. Even the physical structure of many meals assumes sharing. Korean barbecue assumes someone will turn the meat, someone will cut it with the scissors, someone will say, it's burning, and someone else will say, no, no, it's perfect. Even though nobody has ever scientifically settled the correct crispness of pork belly. Stews like 부대찌개 or 전골 often come in a large pot for the table. Side dishes, banchan, sit in the middle. Even if each person has their own rice bowl, much of the meal happens in the shared space. So the table has a grammar. You offer, you refuse, you wait, you notice, you share. You take a little, but not too much. You pretend you do not want the last piece, even though your eyes have been emotionally committed to it for 9 minutes. Eating alone means stepping outside that grammar, and that can feel wonderful, or strange, or sad, or deeply efficient. Sometimes all of the above. Now let's talk about why the Honbap difficulty chart makes so much sense. To understand Honbap, you have to understand that eating alone was not only about being alone. It was about being seen alone. And this brings us back to a Korean word we talked about last week, 눈치. 눈치 is often translated as reading the room or social radar. It is the ability to sense what others are feeling, what the mood requires, and what is happening without everything being said directly. As I mentioned last week, the Korean table has long been one of the places where 눈치 is learned. Who eats first, who waits, who serves, who notices, who takes the last piece, and does everyone silently register that choice forever? So when you eat alone in public, 눈치 does not disappear. It turns outward. You begin to sense the room sensing you. And that is when even a very innocent bowl of noodles can start to feel like a public performance. This is why the difficulty chart is funny, and also why it is not only funny. A convenience store is easy because no one expects intimacy there. The lights are bright, the food is quick, and everyone understands the mission. Eat something, recover slightly, move on. A food court is also easy. Everyone has a tray, everyone is passing through. The whole place says, this is not your final destination. Fast food is easy too. A burger already arrives as a self-contained object. It does not ask for family history. But a barbecue restaurant, that is different. A barbecue table expects a group. The grill expects conversation. The scissors expect someone to have an opinion. The restaurant itself seems to whisper, where are your people? And this is the key. In a culture where meals have often been social, eating alone could make the absence of others visible. The empty chair became part of the meal. Now, here is where the story becomes very Korean. Korea changed fast, very fast. The solo diner, once an awkward figure at the edge of the room, became normal. In 2000, single person households made up about 15% of all Korean households. By 2024, that number had jumped to over 36%. That's roughly 8 million households. 1 in 3 Korean households is now a household of 1. That is not just a lifestyle preference. That is a structural transformation. It means millions of people are making daily decisions alone. What to eat, when to eat, how much to cook, whether cooking is even worth it, whether to order food, heat something, eat outside, or just stand in front of the refrigerator and call it dinner. And when enough people live alone, the city changes. Convenience stores, restaurants, packagings, maps, apps, menus, they all change. There is a phrase people often use for this, the single economy. It sounds very clean, very market research friendly. But underneath that phrase is a very intimate reality. People are eating alone because their lives are organized differently. They marry later or not at all. They live away from family. They work long hours. They study late. They commute. They move to cities. They age alone. They protect their time. They lose shared rhythms. The market calls it a consumer segment. But at the table, it feels like a person with one spoon. This is why the recent CNN travel article about solo dining in Seoul landed so sharply. In the article, Maggie Wong describes asking for a table for one at a half-empty restaurant in Seoul and being turned away. The article also mentions a controversy over a Seoul noodle restaurant that reportedly told the solo diners to order for two or bring a friend or spouse. The reported sign said, "We don't serve loneliness." What a line. It sounds less like a restaurant policy and more like a tiny social verdict printed on a sign. But it reveals the tension perfectly. The restaurant is not just saying one person is inconvenient for our table turnover. It is saying one person does not fit our imagination of what a meal is. Meal is supposed to come with company. A pot is supposed to be shared. A table is supposed to be filled. A dish is supposed to be ordered for two or more. The article also makes clear that solo dining in South Korea can be easy if you know where to look. Business districts, noodle shops, casual local eateries, and solo-friendly spots can work very well. And Naver Maps, the map application many Koreans use instead of Google Maps, even allows people to search for solo diner-friendly places. That detail matters. Because culture does not only change when people become more open-minded. Culture changes when furniture changes, when menus change, when maps change, when an app adds a filter and quietly says, "Yes, this person exists." Now I want to talk about something that I think gets underrepresented in discussions of honbap. For many people, and I mean genuinely many people, eating alone is not a sad compromise. It is a relief. Think about what Korean work culture has traditionally looked like. There is the team lunch, where you go with your coworkers whether you are hungry for the same thing or not. There is 회식, the workplace dinner, which we talked about last week, with its own hierarchy of who sits where, who pours for whom, how much you are expected to drink, and when you are allowed to leave without looking like you are quietly resigning from the human race. Then there is the constant social awareness, the 눈치, the reading of the room, the managing of other people's moods, preferences, and expectations. In that context, eating alone, especially at lunch, which might be the only hour in the workday that genuinely belongs to you, is not isolation. It is sovereignty. One writer in a Korean essay collection I'll be talking about next week describes this perfectly. She works in an office where everyone rushes out at lunch to find something exciting to eat together, something worth discussing, something better than the company cafeteria. And she just wants to eat quietly in the cafeteria, alone, without deciding anything, without performing anything. That desire for the meal that asks nothing of you socially is real, and it matters. Because sometimes a person does not want lunch to be another meeting with soup. Sometimes a person wants to eat without negotiating the menu, matching someone else's pace, laughing at the right moment, or proving that they are a pleasant team member between bites of stew. Sometimes silence is the only part of the day that has not been assigned to someone else. That is why, for me, the key word in the story of Honbap is not loneliness. It is permission. For a long time, eating alone in Korea did not have full social permission. It required either invisibility, like at a convenience store, or a kind of low-key courage. What changed in the 2010s and 2020s is that permission began to arrive. Not all at once, not everywhere, but enough that people started making different choices. The Honbap difficulty chart did not disappear overnight, but more people started attempting level 6, 7, and 8. Then more restaurants made those levels easier. Counters appeared, partitions appeared, one-person menus appeared, map filters appeared. And then a CNN journalist wrote about being turned away from restaurants in Seoul, and the story traveled because it touched the exact tension Korea is still living through. Culturally, one person at a table can still look awkward to some people. Practically, millions of people now need that table. That is the shift. Honbap did not become freedom simply because people became more individualistic. It became freedom because people began to claim a small right that sounds almost too ordinary to name. The right to eat what they want, at their own pace, without turning lunch into a social performance. But that is only one side of the story. Because honbap is not always liberation. Sometimes eating alone feels peaceful because you chose it. Sometimes it hurts because you did not. The same table can mean completely different things depending on the life around it. Student eating alone between classes may feel efficient. An office worker eating alone after morning of meetings may feel relieved. A traveler eating alone may feel adventurous. But the same solitude can begin to feel different when it is not chosen, or when it stretches on for too long. A freelancer eating the seventh lunch of the week alone at home may begin to wonder whether the refrigerator is becoming too emotionally important. An older person eating every meal alone may not experience it as lifestyle at all. It may be what remains after a spouse dies, children move away, friends get sick, and the neighborhood changes. So the question is not simply, is eating alone good or bad? The better question is, what kind of alone are we talking about? Chosen or forced? Peaceful or painful? Restorative or invisible? A small act of freedom? Or a sign that no one is checking in? The answer changes everything. A society should not shame people for eating alone, but it should worry when too many people have no other choice. There is also a reason researchers care about this. The 2025 World Happiness Report found that sharing meals with others is strongly associated with higher life evaluations, more positive emotions, and fewer negative emotions across countries and cultures. We have to be careful here. This does not mean that if you force someone to eat dinner with relatives who treat the meal like a performance review, their happiness will magically rise. Please do not use the word happiness report as an excuse to trap anyone at a tense dinner table. Correlation is not magic. People who are already happier may have more opportunities to eat with others. People with stronger social networks may share more meals. People who are isolated may also be facing poverty, illness, grief, overwork, or mobility issues. But still, the pattern matters. Meals are one of the simplest ways people turn time into relationship. To eat together is to say, even quietly, we are here at the same time. We are pausing together. Your body is visible to me. My body is visible to you. We are not just exchanging information. We are sharing time. So when shared meals become rare, especially in a society that once attached so much meaning to the table, something important is changing. Again, the solo meal is not the whole problem. The solo meal is where the problem may become visible. Let's think about space for a moment. Where is it easy to eat alone? Usually places designed for movement, convenience stores, train stations, food courts, counters, places where the body is not expected to stay too long, places where being alone is part of the design. Where is it harder? Places designed for lingering. Large tables, shared grills, big pots, drinking restaurants, formal restaurants, places where conversation is built into the furniture. This is why Honbap is not only a social trend. It is also a story about space. The solo diner needs architecture. A counter seat can be an invitation. A small table can be a mercy. A partition can be protection. A bar can let someone be alone without feeling abandoned because there is energy around them. A restaurant can say, without words, one person is enough. That matters because shame is often built into space. If every table is large, the solo diner looks like a shortage. If every dish is for two, the solo diner becomes expensive. If every server asks just one with a surprise, the solo diner becomes a small public event. But if the space is designed for one, the body relaxes. This is one reason Japanese ramen counters or sushi counters feel so natural for solo dining. The counter does not ask, "Where is your group?" The counter says, "Sit, eat. This was built for you." Korea has moved in that direction too, especially in business districts and casual dining spaces. But because Korean meals have such a strong shared table tradition, the shift carries more emotional charge. A counter is not a counter. It is a quiet redesign of social expectation. Now, this is important. When businesses adopt to solo diners, that is real. It helps. It matters. A person can only choose freely when the world around them makes the choice possible. If a restaurant requires two portions, eating alone is not just awkward, it is expensive. If the menu has no single serving option, the solo diner is punished for being one. If the city has no place where one person can sit comfortably, then solitude becomes a logistical problem. So, yes, infrastructure matters, but the market recognizing you is not the same as a society caring for you. A convenience store lunchbox can feed you. It cannot ask why you have eaten every meal alone this week. A restaurant partition can protect you from stares. It cannot tell whether you are peacefully alone or dangerously isolated. A map filter can help you find a place to eat. It cannot make sure someone will notice if you disappear. That distinction matters because modern life is very good at selling solutions to loneliness without always addressing loneliness itself. A chair for one is good. A meal for one is good. A city where one person can eat without shame is good. But if the only thing a person has is purchasable solitude, we have to ask harder questions. Who has time to eat? Who has someone to call? Who has a protected lunch break? Who has enough money to choose a healthy meal? Who has relationships that do not require constant performance? Who is alone because they are free? Who is alone because the world has quietly stopped expecting them at any table? So, what should we do with Honbap? I think we need a better etiquette around aloneness. Not every person eating alone wants company. This is very important. Sometimes the kindest thing is to leave someone alone. Sometimes the kindest thing is to invite them, but leave them room to say no. There is a huge difference between "Do you want to join us? No pressure," and "Why are you eating alone? Come with us." The first one opens the door. The second one turns solitude into a problem. And sometimes people do not want their solitude fixed. They want it respected. At the same time, we should not become so respectful that we stop noticing each other completely. The goal is not to eliminate all awkwardness by pretending no one exists. The goal is gentler attention. Attention without surveillance. Invitation without pressure. Concern without control. A way of saying "you're welcome" without saying "explain yourself." That is a delicate social skill. Maybe it is a new kind of 눈치. Not the old 눈치 that makes a sandwich feel like a public performance, but a kinder 눈치. The ability to notice without judging, to offer without trapping, to leave room without abandoning. Maybe that is the social skill the Honbap era asks of us. One of the things I keep coming back to is that a table for one can mean so many things. It can be independence, grief, efficiency, exhaustion, poverty, or peace. It can say, "Nobody invited me," or "Please do not invite me." It can mean, "I finally get to choose what I want," or "I have no one to choose with." This is why I don't like each judgments about solo dining. Call it only sad and you miss the freedom. Call it only empowering and you miss the loneliness. Call it simply normal and you miss the long history of the shared table that makes it meaningful in Korea. The difficult truth is that all of this can be true. That is what makes Honbap such a good window into Korea. It sits at the intersection of so many changes: family structure, work culture, urban life, housing, aging, youth stress, consumer markets, restaurant design, and the emotional memory of the Korean table. That is a lot to put on one tray. But Korean food culture has always asked food to carry more than food. In 2024, a Korean publisher released an anthology called Prose for Those Who Eat Lunch Alone. 혼자 점심 먹는 사람을 위한 산문. 10 Korean writers, 50 short essays, 5 from each writer. Some of the essays are about food. Some are about work, exhaustion, and the lunches that never happened. Some are about the strangely intimate things your mind does when you're alone with a meal and no one is watching. Next week, we will go through it together. Because sometimes a book can become a table too. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this helped you understand why honbap, eating alone, is not just a food trend in Korea, but a window into changing family life, work culture, urban space, and the complicated difference between solitude and loneliness. If you'd like to look more closely at the Korean words and phrases I used in today's episode, check the episode notes. I have included the Korean, Romanization, and English meanings there. Take care and see you next week. 오늘도 들어주셔서 감사합니다. 다음 주에 만나요. Bye!